Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Deeply Rooted podcast by Planting Roots. I'm Erin.
And I'm Liz.
And on this podcast, we have honest conversations to help foster a strong, faith-filled community where military women and wives find encouragement, strength, and direction in embracing God's purpose. Welcome, and we're excited to join you today. Happy holidays. I know we're in the thick of the holiday season, but Liz, how are you? How's your week been?
My week has been good. Right now, when Erin and I are filming this, it's the day before Thanksgiving, and me and my husband are going to Florida to see his family, and we're supposed to leave on Monday, but his job wouldn't let him off, so we're leaving tonight. I know, typical military, he's in like training right now, so I took leave and thought we were going to be able to travel for the week, but we're not. So we're going to drive. We're driving tonight, late after work, so hopefully that goes well and we make it there. By the time you're listening to this, Thanksgiving will be over. So the long travel day will be over. So I'm trying to mentally prepare for that because it's 9 hours. So that's going to be a very long drive. But other than that, this week I've just really been diving into the practice of fasting. Reading through the Bible, it's something that comes up a lot, that a lot of different people in the Bible do when they're trying to seek answers from God. And I feel like it's a forgotten practice in today's day and age of Christianity. I've done it a couple times, but I don't think my heart was right behind it. And so I wanted to learn more about it because it's something I want to practice more.
I feel like people talk about intermediate fasting as a health tip, but not as a spiritual discipline.
Exactly, because there's a lot of health benefits, which I'll touch on a couple of those, but I also wanted to know the spiritual side behind it because I think it's really important and it can really change your relationship with God, and it's really beneficial when you're seeking answers from God because you're kind of eliminating those distractions. But I also wanted to preface, before you conduct any sort of food extended fasting, to consult with a doctor. This would not be good for Erin who's breastfeeding or if you're pregnant.
Yeah.
So if you're not in a place where you can do the other things you can fast, like social media, TV, and all that kind of stuff. But if you are able to, I encourage you to kind of do your research and figure out what works best for you. And you can start small and kind of build your way up. And I'll talk through different types of fast and just what is fasting, because I just wanted to learn for myself. So I'm by no means an expert faster or anything, but I wanted to learn, and I felt like I was kind of ignorant in this whole world of fasting. So I was like, okay, let's talk about it. So fasting is basically denying yourself something. So this is typically food, but it can also be anything that you kind of rely on for comfort or pleasure in order to draw near to God. So when we're fasting, we're not just abstaining from food or a certain habit or YouTube. We're actually removing distractions so that God can speak to us. And it's also a way of humbling ourselves so that we can recognize that we are fully dependent on God, and He is our sustainer for everything, for our very breath, for our food, for everything. And it kind of reminds you of that, and it reminds you of your insufficiency and how much you need God. But I was reading in 2 Corinthians 12 a few days ago, and it's not talking about fasting, but what Paul is talking about kind of reminded me of the heart of fasting. But Paul was basically talking about a thorn in his flesh, which was a affliction that God used to humble him, and he prayed 3 times for God to remove it. But God's response was, "My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness." So through this, Paul realized that this thorn wasn't something to be removed, but it's something to embrace, because it was through his weakness that God's power would be displayed. And I think this kind of mimics and connects the power of fasting, because like Paul's thorn, fasting is a way of humbling ourselves and acknowledging our dependence on God. And it's about the absence of what we usually rely on that realizes how much we need God and His sufficiency and all that. So it kind of reminded me and mimics that trial that Paul had, because I think the closest I've been to God is when I need Him most and I'm desperate for Him and I'm in the lowest lows of my life. And I think fasting you can mimic that feeling and continue to rely on and get close to God. So even if you're not facing a really hard trial right now, it feels like everything is going well in your life, you can still fast and kind of mimic that feeling and that dependence and that desperation for God, because it is in the fasting that you're creating more of a desperation and dependence on Him. And so we start to shift from a place of self-reliance to total surrender and dependence. And there are a lot of different instances of fasting throughout the Bible, so I just wanted to talk about a few of them because, like I said in the beginning, a lot of people do fast throughout the Bible. So Esther fasted in the book of Esther. So before she approached the king to save her people, the Jews, she called for a fast of 3 days. So the 3-day sometimes is called the Esther fast, and she asked for God's favor and God's wisdom for that. And other people around her also fasted. And then David fasted in times of distress. So whenever he was seeking God's guidance. Nehemiah fasted and prayed for God's help as he sought to rebuild Jerusalem. And then Hannah also fasted for a child, and God answered her prayer by giving her Samuel. And then the early church fasted in Acts 13 before sending out missionaries, and they prayed for direction from God, wisdom from God. And so all these instances, people are seeking something from God. And so they're removing food so that they can better hear from God and better rely on God in the midst of those decisions. And I think fasting is especially important in today's world, not just back then, but now, because we live in a world of excess and instant gratification. Like, you can get food whenever you want. You can buy things from Amazon whenever you want. You can literally get stuff the next day. You can order groceries to your door. You can eat whenever you want. We're just in a world of more food, more comfort, more entertainment, more distractions. And I think fasting is a way of saying no to that and yes to God. And I feel like it's so hard today because we're just not used to being denied anything. And then I also wanted to make the note that you're not supposed to boast or show off your fasting. It's actually a private devotion between us and God. And Jesus talked about this in Matthew 6:16-18 when he says, "When you fast, don't make it obvious as the hypocrites do. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, so that your fasting will not be obvious to others, but only to your Father." So fasting is a way to draw near to God, not to be seen by others. And then I just wanted to talk about a couple different types of fast you can do, and you can research these more and find one that works best for you. But you have a partial fast, which is also called the Daniel fast, because in Daniel, we read about a time, I think it's in chapter 10, where Daniel ate only vegetables and drank water for 21 days when he was seeking God. And so a partial fast basically involves eliminating certain foods from your diet, like meat, bread, sugary treats, kind of delicacies, and it's a way to cut out distractions while still consuming food and denying your flesh something. And then you can do a complete fast, which means drinking only water. You can also do, some people do coffee or non-calorie teas and stuff. And you can choose to fast for 24 hours, 3 days, even a week. It's basically a deeper form of fasting that allows you to focus on God in the absence of food. And then there's also things called liquid fast. So this is where you choose to drink only liquids. So it would be like juice, chicken broth, all that kind of stuff that has calories, so you get a little bit of nutritional value while still denying yourself solid food. And then, like I mentioned before, you could do social media or other fasts. If you can't fast for health reasons, I think this is also super beneficial, because whenever I take some time off social media, I feel so much better, and I spend so much more time with God because of taking out social media, because you're removing those distractions, and you're naturally going to get closer to God if you replace the distractions with time with God. And then I also wanted to mention one of the cool health benefits of fasting, because fasting has kind of become a little popular on the health side of social media. That's where I've been seeing it, and so I wanted to research the spiritual side, but there are some really cool health effects physically, so it's cool to see that a spiritual practice actually also has a lot of benefits for your body. So one of the things that was super interesting to me is when you fast for kind of extended periods of time, there's something in your body that happens that's called autophagy, and I'm probably mispronouncing that, but I'm trying my best. And so when you're fasting, it kind of triggers this, and this is basically a process where your body breaks down and removes different dysfunctional cells, proteins, and different components within your body, and it basically gives you kind of a reset, cleans out your body, and recycles different damaged material. You basically have zombie cells, which could be cancer cells and stuff, and then it comes in, and since your body is not focused on digesting food, it's focused on repairing those cells. And so this can improve inflammation, brain health, and it can also lower the risk of cancer and Alzheimer's. And so the longer you fast, the more autophagy occurs. I think it peaks around 72 hours to 4 days, however many hours that is. So 3 to 4 days. And it's popular because of its anti-aging and longevity benefits. So I thought that was also super interesting, because I think this is kind of more of a recent discovery, the whole autophagy thing. So it's very interesting, and I've done like some 24-hour fasts, but I want to work myself up to 72 hours, but that just sounds so hard. But that's why I was researching. I was like, this seems like a lot, but I want to practice it because I think it's important. And then I just wanted to kind of end with this. I feel like when I've done it, I just haven't done it right, because it's not necessarily about what you're giving up, it's about what you're putting in its place. So you're supposed to replace the food or distraction with worship, prayer, and spending time with God, because that's like where the real spiritual transformation happens. And I feel like when I've done it, I want to like do it all. I want to stop, not do social media and not eat, because I'll just like replace the hunger pains. I'll distract myself with like YouTube or social media instead of like going to God in the Bible. And so I think that is so important, because if you're just replacing the food with social media, there's no spiritual benefit in that. Like, you might get the health benefit, but there is no spiritual benefit to that. And so I just encourage you, if you do want to fast, to really lean into God. And I'm preaching to the choir here, because I want to do that, because I feel like every time I've done it, I've just distracted myself with other things. And I've watched people who aren't Christians do it, and they're just like trying to distract themselves so they don't feel hungry. But the whole purpose is to sit in that hunger and feel that desperation from God and lean into his sufficiency for everything. So yeah, that's basically all my notes and my research on fasting. I hope you got something from it and are encouraged. I know we're in the holiday season, so I'm like, well, it's probably not the best time, but
Yeah, like tomorrow's Thanksgiving, Liz. Thank you.
I know. I'm like, well, obviously Thanksgiving is a time of fellowship and eating food.
No, but this is really good. I did a sugar fast when we were in DC the summer before our senior year. And the way that I describe that time is just light. Like, I was light, and it had nothing to do with like physical. Obviously, when you cut out processed food and sugar, like, your body's gonna feel better. But more than anything, I was doing it along with the devotional. I think it was by Wendy Speak, called The Sugar Fast. And so each morning you were reading, and she knew you were doing the fast. So like the what you were reading in the Word kind of paired with the fast. And it was very, very good. And what I remember most about that time is that my life didn't center around food. It's very easy for our lives to center around food. I mean, we have to eat 3 times a day for most of us, and activities with friends center around food. You go out for ice cream, you go have a drink, you go blah, blah, blah. And I was lucky to be with a group of people who were generally very, very healthy, and so they weren't doing those things anyway. But I remember the things that we did, the conversations we had, the time that I had in the Word, way more than I remember like what we were eating or that anything was centered around food. So it's cool for both the spiritual aspect and just physically too. When you brought up the physical stuff, I was thinking about how when people have like autoimmune or any metabolism issues, one of the first things that doctors will recommend is cutting out gluten and dairy. Like, getting a blank slate is the goal medically, and to see which foods are impacting your body. And so spiritually, I think opening that blank slate for God to work is the goal. And it's when we find that we're hearing from God the most, and it's most clear.
For the sugar fast, you cut out all added sugar, basically? Is that what you did?
So I still ate fruit and things like that, but it was all added sugar. And of course, there's so many different additives and ingredients. Like, it's so annoying how, like, if something doesn't have added sugar, it'll still have, like, stevia or, like, monk fruit or things like that to sweeten it. But, like, I'm definitely a sweet tooth. This year, one thing that I did was say that at the New Year, I was like, okay, I can't bring any sweets inside the house that aren't ingredients. And so if I wanted a sweet thing, then I had to make it myself, and that was a good thing, because I sometimes just didn't make anything because I was too lazy and didn't want to. But anyway, thank you for bringing this up, Liz. It's very good. And even as a reminder, right before Thanksgiving, it's great. So
I know. Maybe after the holidays, find a time when you can still fast other things too, not just like food.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, find a time and fast something. I kind of want to try that sugar fast, because I have a really big sweet tooth. Like, sugary drinks are like my kryptonite, and it's something I think I'd probably feel a lot better without. So, did you also see fasted like stevia, all kind of artificial sweeteners too?
Yeah.
Okay.
And some people will like let like let themselves eat honey, but I didn't even want to do honey. Like I wanted to cut out all sweeteners, like extra sweeteners. So
I feel like that's like a good challenge for the new year too. Like doing like 20. I know some people do like 21 days of prayer and fasting, and so like starting the new year with that, and then fasting something that is a comfort in your life could be really beneficial for your relationship with Christ.
For sure. For me this week, I have gotten caught up in the to-do list of the holidays, and it's really annoying me. With tomorrow being Thanksgiving, that means Black Friday is Friday, Black Friday is Friday. And
everyone's deals have already come out. Like, I know. Weeks ago. I'm so confused. I'm so confused about this.
And so in my head, I'm like, okay, am I waiting for Black Friday? Like, are the deals going to get better, or is this it? Like, could I have done all my shopping 2 weeks ago? Like, anyway, I have just gotten super annoyed with just the consumerism, and it's just not been good for me mentally. It's something that my husband and I have just quarreled over. Like, it has just not been good. As a mom, I talked about this a few weeks ago, but like as a mom, I want to make sure that I am making my son's first Christmas special, and his birthday's right after that. So I'm like, well, okay, might as well jump on the deals and all this stuff. But man, I have just gotten caught up on the checklist. Like Christmas card photos we had last Friday, and the day before, my husband goes, "Oh yeah, I think that I might have to work tomorrow. Have you already paid for pictures?" I'm like, "Nolan, yes, I have. I've paid the retainer. Like you can't just like reschedule photo." Anyway, that's just the military. You know how it is. But yeah, the checklist, Christmas card photos, gifts, making cookies for neighbors, like all those things that used to be and should be for the sake of remembering Advent season have just become things that I want to cross off my list. And so with it being my son's first Christmas, it's been a good thing to wrestle with this week, because I do want to take a step back and start fresh with him, like with our traditions and with what we do as a family. And I don't want it to just be what people online are doing that seem fun. Like I want to just actually think about our traditions and make them meaningful and make them for the purpose of remembering Christ's coming, which is what Advent season is all about, Jesus' arrival. And the Planting Roots devotional, Seeing Jesus and Isaiah's prophecies on the YouVersion Bible app, has been very helpful with that. The first week of the devotional that we talked about last week focused on Jesus as wonderful counselor, and week 2 centered around the idea that he is mighty God. So in Isaiah, God's people were told that Jesus was In Isaiah, God's people were told that Jesus would come as a child and a son, but he also told them that the government would rest on his shoulders. They expected him to come and overtake the governments that oppressed them. They heard the word might and envisioned a man strong in military and political might. But God's kingdom doesn't look like the ones that Jesus knew, nor the one that we live in today. In the Bible, the Hebrew word gibber is translated to mighty, but this English translation doesn't account for the full meaning. It doesn't really capture the full meaning. Might relates to strength, but it also means courage, self-sacrifice, and moral excellence. Unfortunately, many of the people that we consider leaders, especially in our military communities and politics, look for what they can get from you rather than looking for what they can do for you. And I've been thinking about this a lot recently, because in a job where promotion is linked to success, this is a really hard thing to avoid, even for the most upright people. In fact, it's something that I've struggled with it, because the message that I've heard from people is that simply doing my job at work is not enough to be successful as an officer long term. In order to achieve success and good evaluations, I need to not only be doing the job that I was assigned, but also be preparing myself for the next thing and having things on my marks that talk about what I'm doing in education, like grad school, or what I'm doing outside of the military in community service. Like, they always want to know about all the extra stuff, and simply doing my job doesn't seem like enough. And so it's really, unfortunately, easy to throw people aside while doing those things, even though the root of joining the organization in the first place was to serve others and to do something greater than myself. So the devotional says that leaders today surround themselves with servants. Jesus surrounds us with his servanthood. Leaders of this day use their power to build empires. Jesus used his power to wash our feet and make us clean and comfortable. Leaders of this day trade their influence for money. God so loved that he gave. So I have to stop and say, this is really hard. I wish it wasn't, but it is. Being a leader like Jesus will mean that we do not look like the rest of the quote-unquote successful leaders. I don't even think that doing this would make us look like average leaders. I think we'll look different, and the things that Jesus prioritizes people, that's not what the pull of society prioritizes as much as they want to say that they do. And we have to be okay with looking different, with that wrestle, with the expectations that our command has for us. It might look different than the expectations that Jesus has for us, and we have to be okay with that. And people aren't necessarily going to understand some of the decisions that we make, and this concept got me thinking about an experience that I had when I was on a Coast Guard cutter 2 years ago. And when I was on the cutter, I loved navigation. When I finally got up to the bridge of a ship after studying navigation for years in school, it all clicked, and I got really excited and enjoyed it and found success in it. I was pretty good at it. But one night, when I was trying to help another junior officer on board who didn't go to the academy with maneuvering boards, which is just a tool that ship drivers use to learn relative motion. But one thing we got to talking about was what we wanted to do with our careers, and I wasn't completely sure Coast Guard wise at that point, but what I did know is that I wanted to be a mom and wanted to work in ministry. And so I talked about that a bit, and she kind of questioned that, and her comment was, I just don't get it. You're so good at this, and you just want to pass it up and be a mom so soon. You can do that later. And I want to tell you, sitting here today, that I heard that and responded confidently with assurance that, children are a gift from the Lord, and part of the God-given purpose of women is to bear children and raise them to know the Lord. But I didn't. That's not how I responded. The part of her statement that I clung to was, you're so good at this. And for the remainder of that patrol, I just started working to gain favor with my command, to make the other JOs know that I was the top dog pursuing my qual the fastest. I wouldn't have admitted this at the time, but looking back, man, it is very clear, and I regret it. And I just took it so seriously and got caught up in the potential of what I could be one day, rather than using that time that I had on the bridge in that leadership role to have good conversations with people, and to really, even just simply do what my job was to do, focus on that, like saving people and protecting our borders. That was a tangent, but all that to say, this is tough. Serving like Jesus and being governed by our mighty God is not easy. It's simple, but it sure ain't easy. And one of my mentors recently, she told me the story when we first started meeting years ago, but I go back to it often. She told me a story about a officer that she knew who had 19 years of service, got out because he heard God's calling and felt his prompting. And I don't know if I would do it. I want to say that I would. I want to be that attentive to God's word and know his voice that clearly. But that is just so 19 years. That is just so contrary to what the world would tell you. Man, you got one more year, and then you got a pension, you got healthcare, all this stuff. But he got out because he knew that that's what God was calling him to. And so I go back to that story often as a heart check. What is my priority? What do I want to be governed by? Do I want to be governed by my military leaders and what the world says? I have to some extent, but ultimately I want to be governed and recognize God as mighty, as our mighty authority. The devotional goes on to talk about how Jesus is mighty God, and it dives into his time on earth to see the miracles and wonders that back up that claim. I was also reading Galatians this week with the Bible recap, and I'm going to read Galatians 1, 6 through 10, because it kind of relates to this. And it says, I am astonished that you are so quickly deserting him who called you in the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel. Not that there is another one, but there are some who trouble you and want to distort the gospel of Christ. But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel contrary to the one we preach to you, let him be accursed. As we have said before, so I say now again, if anyone is preaching to you a gospel contrary to the one you received, let him be accursed. For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Or am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ. So that first line, I am astonished that you're so quickly deserting the one who called you. Like, man, like I've done that so many times. I still do that. Like, I desert the one who I know is mighty God. And so this was a heart check week. So check out the Advent devotional by Planting Roots, Seeing Jesus in Isaiah's Prophecy. You can search it on the Bible app. You can find it on our website. It is very good for this Advent season.
That is so good, Erin. I loved when you were talking about the story on your boat, and I actually got chills when you were talking about how you focused on, like, oh, you're so good at this. And the military is such a hard place to be as a woman, because I get the same exact, like, response, or a few other ones will be like, oh, you and your husband could stay in and both get pensions. Like, that's 15 more years of my life, and I'd much rather spend those 15 years at home serving my family there than in the military serving. And like, it's not they're like, what about the money? But it's not about the money. Like, that doesn't matter. Like, what's important to me is my family. And it's just, I've never felt supported in that in the military. Like, whenever you tell people I want to get out and be a mom, I've had one person support me, and he was like, there needs to be more support for women in the military who want to get out and be moms, because there is not enough of that, because there's so much focus on retention and all that stuff. Like, you can do all the retention studies in the world, but it's just like natural, like biologically
human
it's natural
nature.
Yes, like, you're not going to be able to fix that. Not all the benefits and stuff isn't going to be able to fix that. Maybe some people will stay in, but a lot of women get out because they want to be at home with their family and serving their family there. And it's fine if you feel convicted and choose otherwise, but that's my conviction from my family. And I just think there isn't enough support, and it can be so frustrating feeling like you don't feel supported by your command in what you want to do. Early on in my career, I was too afraid to be like, oh, I want to get out and be a mom, kind of like how you responded and what you were saying. I felt that like the first 2 years, and I was always like, oh, I don't know what I want to do. I thought it's completely changed my heart on like motherhood and everything too. That could be a whole nother episode. But I used to be really terrified, and I knew I wanted to have kids, but I didn't know. I was still scared, and I didn't feel that desire completely. But as I've gotten on in my career, I've gotten more bold in being like, I don't want to stay in. I want to be a mom. Because they asked me during my like counseling for my evaluation report, oh, what are your long-term goals? And I was like, to be honest, I don't have any. Like, this is kind of it for me. This is my last tour. So, and yeah, people always have the things that they're going to say, but I think it's so important to know your identity and your calling in Christ, because you can stand firm on that when the world is telling you otherwise and kind of telling you the lies of the world and success and money and all that stuff. And so I encourage you, if you do have trouble with that in your workplace and you're like us and you want to get out and be a mom, like, just be rooted in the word and be rooted in prayer and be rooted in God's will for your life and stand firm on that, and don't worry about what other people think about you. We serve God, not man. So just a reminder to do that. But I loved your story and just reflecting on that.
And I want to say, too, that even if you do feel like God has clearly called you into a military career, then just be honest with yourself about this wrestle and have accountability around you to keep you accountable and in check on where your heart's at. Because, like I said, in any job, military, even being a mom, there are so many things that we can idolize, that we can want to do for the sake of where it gets us. And a lot of those aren't bad. They're healthy desires that we want for us and our family. But we have to make sure that we are being governed by the Lord as mighty God, and not by what society, what our leaders, what even our family. Like, we gotta just prioritize correctly. And so we're not calling out one or the other, but just heart check yourself, go back to some of these verses, read the word, as we always talk about, because it'll give you the clear guidance that you need.
So true. And I also wanted to echo that just because you know you're going to get out, it's not like a pass to not work heartily unto the Lord, because our work does reflect on the Lord when we do call ourselves Christian in the workplace. People associate our work with God. So I think it's still super important to work as hard as you can. Obviously not to the point where it becomes an idol in your life, but working and showing Jesus to everybody, I think, is also important.
And there are so many people to serve in the workplace. If we change our mindset, then we are such a powerful tool in the military to influence the kingdom, to bring people in. And so just really go to work each day, pray before work each day, pray for your people. That'll help shift the focus off of yourself, like we talked about last week, onto the people that you have the ability to impact.
And then I also just wanted to piggyback off what you said about Jesus as mighty God and the word gibber, which, to reiterate, means courage, self-sacrifice, and moral excellence. And so that's the meaning of mighty in the Bible. And I think Jesus encapsulates all of those terms so well. Like, he was courageous. He gave up his divinity as the Son of God to come to earth as a man. And then self-sacrifice, like Jesus died on the cross for our sins. He severed his relationship with the Father. Like, he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? All for us. Like, that is self-sacrifice. I haven't seen any other example as strong as that one and as powerful as that one. And then moral excellence, Jesus was perfect. Like, enough said about that. Like, Jesus encapsulates those terms perfectly. And so the Jews were just looking in the wrong place for their Messiah. Like, he was right before their eyes, but they were trying to find a warrior, somebody like David who came and conquered armies. But if you look at the true definition of the Hebrew term of mighty, you can see that Jesus encapsulates all those terms, and he is just the perfect king we needed, and he accomplished so much more than they were expecting. He saved us from our sins. We have complete redemption because of him, and one day he's going to return, and I'm very excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too, and that's what Advent is all about, is just remembering the arrival of Jesus as a baby initially, but also remembering that he's going to come back one day and getting excited about that. So thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that this blessed you in the midst of a busy holiday season and reminds you the real purpose of Advent. If you like this podcast, we'd love if you would like it and leave us a review. It really helps the algorithm, and we want to get this podcast. It's such a niche topic. Christian military women is 3 categories. When you bring them all together, it's very niche. So we want to get this podcast to as many people as we can in that group, and you can help that by liking and sharing it with a friend. Thank you for joining us, and you can find more encouraging resources on the Planting Roots website at plantingroots.net. And with that, I'm Erin.
And I'm Liz.
And we pray you stay deeply rooted.